Tonight, tonight we'll have to keep the censors busy on their toes, so to speak.
And Jim, I just want to say what a good sense of humor you have. I really appreciate that too. I know you've met me a few times and dealt with it. You're rolling with the punches really well. I'll be good.
All right. Well, we are live. This is good evening, everybody. This is Mac McCullough, Willard Library, manning the controls and multitasking here. Here for another episode of Peeks into the Past, where we make history fun.
Yay! Fun.
We're trying.
And what could be more fun than a stroll through Battle Creek's historic and majestic Oak Hill Cemetery? Tonight with me, I have, and hopefully have one more person coming on. We had Linda Hyslop. She is the executive director of the Oak Hills Cemetery, and we were on, and then suddenly she was gone. But let's hope she comes back. Also with me this evening, an authority on many things in history. The cemetery included Jim Jackson.
Yay!
Jackson, the editor of
He really is amazing. He knows a lot.
His book about Oak Hill Cemetery, and also Veterans of Oak Hill Cemetery. Did I get that title right, Jim?
Yes.
All right. Well, thank you for joining us. And then they're hamming it up for the camera as usual. We have Kurt Thornton.
Great to be here. This is so much fun to be back, Mac. You just said Mac does such a great job doing this, making us sound like we know what we're talking about. He does a great job.
And this is why I bring Kurt back all the time, because he just tells me how great I am.
Yep.
And then also with us is Emily Powell. Emily Powell is the outreach and education specialist at Kingman Museum. Was a guest on my program last week on Stories at Sundown. So always good to have her back twice in a month. We'll just have to keep going.
Lucky.
I just love her enthusiasm. Emily, you're always so enthusiastic about history and saving stuff. You're fun to have on the show.
Thank you, Kurt. I love it.
Yeah. So let's just jump right in, and we're going to go ahead and put up a slideshow here, and we'll take a look at it. And let's hope Linda comes around back, because we put a lot of work into researching this. But I just want to start a little bit, take us back to the beginning of Oak Hill Cemetery. And anybody can chime in at any time we want. We're not big on procedure here. But Jim, how do we all start?
Well, I think Oak Hill is, the third cemetery in Battle Creek. It is now the oldest because the first two were downtown, and progress got in the way of that. And I see Linda has joined us.
Hey, Linda.
Hey, Linda Hyslop.
Rejoined us.
Nice. Glad you
so
got
in
back.
In 1844, the land was donated, I think 10 acres initially, and the Quaker Cemetery and the Old City Cemetery the bodies were removed and reinterred into Oak Hill Cemetery. So even though the cemetery goes back to 1844, they have burials predating that. So, Linda, you probably heard everything I said.
Most of it.
Anything more about the history of Oak Hill, the beginnings?
You got it.
Okay.
So, Jim, can I ask a question?
Yes.
When they built the tower section of the sanitarium, the Federal Center, they found bodies up there, and was that where the old cemetery was? Because they found 3 bodies and they moved them into Oak Hill. I know they did reinter them when they found them, but was that?
Yeah, I don't know if I have the addresses of the old Quaker Cemetery, but it is on some old plat maps and things that I've come across. I know they were downtown proper. Now, Oak Hill was out way in the boonies, which is now walking distance from downtown, sort of. So it's not all that far out, but the other ones were right down in the hub of the activity today, right down by the Federal Center. So that's quite entirely possible. I couldn't tell you if it was the city cemetery or the Quaker cemetery.
Okay, thanks.
Probably the city.
Mm-hmm.
So it is the final resting place for so many of our pioneers in Battle Creek and luminaries throughout history. Emily, talk us a little bit about this period in history and what cemeteries meant to communities.
Absolutely. I mean, it surely isn't an accident that we see Oak Hill Cemetery looking the way it does now. I mean, even today, it evokes a sense of beauty and landscape, and it's almost a park-like setting. It was very typical at this time period. In the early 1800s, most of our people were buried in either family plots on the back property, or in graveyards that were adjacent to places of faith, so churchyards, if you will. And it was the early 1800s that we started seeing a huge shift to wanting a place of peace. And so, especially in these like burgeoning urban centers, we wanted to get away from these industrial, grimy centers in the city, and that's why we started to see cemeteries or these graveyards being shifted away from urban centers out into a park-like setting. And this in America was known as the rural cemetery movement. And so because we wanted more of changing sentiments of death at the time, we were moving away from again, like death is a very curt and depressing thing, to something that was more beautiful, romantic. It was not just a death, but a passing of life. And so our cemeteries directly reflected this. This is why you see rolling hills and meandering paths and landscaped trees and flowers. People at the time, and again, this was the first one was 1831. We saw this with Mount Auburn in Boston, that first rural cemetery, and then shifted to places like Greenwood in New York, and we see that in Mountain Home Cemetery in Kalamazoo. Battle Creek followed right along. So Oak Hill Cemetery was established in 1844, so right on the tails of these national trends, and it shows Battle Creek was not some backwoods town, right? We not only, had access to these trends happening at the national level, but we had access to the resources to make them happen here in our own town. So you see this beautiful space. That's why it looks the way it does. And certainly the materials that were used with the markers, the symbolism, everything was showcasing these trends happening in the mid-19th century at the time.
Wow.
So, Emily, were most people, when they were like going to these new cemeteries, were they doing family plots, or were they like
Yeah, I mean,
ones,
in a
like...
lot of these cities, this was the only green space, right? This was the park. So you would see people, walking on dates. They would be picnicking with their families, and even up to like Victorian era, you'd see a lot of this happening, and it certainly happened here in Battle Creek as well. Again, it was providing sanctuary away from the icky grime of the city, of the this burgeoning industrial era, right? So this was a place of peace, and it was certainly a place where we would want our loved ones to have their final resting place. Like, what a respectful, romantic, beautiful place to be placed for eternity, in theory.
Yeah.
Yeah, and to give them a plug, Oak Hill Cemetery is, I mean, those cemeteries are beautiful. Oak Hill is beautiful. Like I said, when I was young, my mom, we used to go up there and walk around the cemetery. My mom was a historian, and it was beautiful. It was like a park, and you'd walk through. I never had fears or anything like that, because people go, wasn't it scary to go up the cemetery? I go, no, it's really sort of beautiful. It's really a nice place, and it still is. They do a beautiful job maintaining it. It's really a pretty place.
It is gorgeous. I want to go through a few photos with Linda and have her describe. I don't know if you noticed, Kurt, that Ed Jenkins did answer your question
Right,
about
I saw that. Yep.
towers, and he also shared that he had some ancestors built at Oak Hill.
Yeah.
Linda, what are we looking at here? And I'll go through some of the slides, just general.
This is the office as it stands now. I think you have a slide that shows the office with a bell tower.
Yeah.
And that was when it was originally built. But this is the office the way it looks right now.
Okay. When was it built? Do you know off the top of your head?
I know it was in the 1940s.
Okay.
1941, Mick.
Oh, 41.
Yes.
Okay.
And there's your bell tower. Oh, that's the chapel, right?
Chapel. Yep.
Oh, yeah, that's the chapel.
And the windows are beautiful in there. It's a beautiful chapel. It's really nice.
I think they were designed by the same architect. and using the same materials.
Was that Lewis Sarvis?
Sarvis, I think it was Sarvis. We looked that
Yes.
up. Sarvis Associates, yeah.
Mhm. Now that's the vault where they used to keep the bodies in the wintertime because
Oh,
they couldn't bury them because the dirt was too hard.
too hard.
The ground was too hard. So they would put them in the vault and bury them in the spring when the weather got better.
Huh.
Now we still have winters today, but they had shovels. We have backhoes today.
Right.
Exactly.
Makes a difference.
And I just like this shot. It's just kind of the beauty that you see there. It is a very pleasant place to just kind of
Mhm.
stroll around.
Yep.
Yeah, Emily was talking about people hiking and walking their dogs and things. And I know back in the day, in the newspapers, I came from the Detroit area, and there were people having picnics, not necessarily by their family plot, but just because it was a park-like setting.
Yeah.
That whole drive towards
Mhm.
making cemeteries more of a park.
I'd like to point out too, really quick, Mac, since you've got a nice array of stones here, markers,
Mhm.
is that cemeteries have always been a direct reflection of what people were prioritizing in their life as well. So you can very easily walk through a cemetery and see that you have one giant family stone that is then surrounded by the headstones of people who belong in that family. So you are directly getting a sense of what these people found important, and that was family. What's your last name? And you can see that this is how you are identified, more importantly than anything else, even more important than religion in some cases. It's what family do you belong to? And so it is that giant family stone in the center that showcases that.
And that's less common now, right?
Correct. You don't necessarily see that now.
Yeah.
What you see
Part of that
today-
part of that comes under Oak Hill, I believe. Correct me, Linda, if I'm wrong, but they still have no restrictions on the type of stone. I mean, you can many cemeteries now have restrictions. They have to be flush
Mhm.
so they can cut the lawn. Here, I mean, if you have a large stone like that, you may have to have additional plots to, underneath it. You may have to purchase additional plots, but for the most part, you can put Washington Monument there if you have the money to do it.
Yeah.
Yeah, we just had a gentleman that spent quite a bit of money on a family plot and had a very beautiful stone that he put in. It's quite large, and you just don't see that anymore. That was a real odd thing at this point in time.
Yeah. Yeah.
But back in the history of it, there are so many of them that have the large stone and then the other stones around it with the people and identifying who's buried in the spots.
Today, we don't necessarily see those large extended families
No.
anymore, right?
No.
It's more emphasis on the nuclear family.
Yeah.
And so that is that, the parents and the children, and then that might be what you see reflected in the cemetery. But not necessarily, and again, that's a direct reflection of these, these shifts over time and how the cemeteries can display that.
And so many people move now. I'm sorry, there's lots of people that their family's gone to the West Coast, the East Coast. They pass away. They don't want to be buried back here. They want to be buried where they lived. And
Exactly.
that's changing, yeah.
So if you stroll around, and we're going to go through a few sites and go into some detail, but not so much on these, but the CW Post Mausoleum. You won't be able to go in and see these crypt. Is that what they're called?
Mhm.
Unless they're open for a tour. Interesting there, though. I mean, he or Lila, they're not actually in those crypts. They're buried well underground, right?
They're just for show.
Just
Yeah.
so.
And what a show they are.
Yeah.
Yes, they are.
Who's got money? We know.
And then,
Again, direct reflection.
yeah.
Uh,
And the Kellogg family plot there.
Now, the one on the left was Dr. Kellogg, and the one on the right was W.K. Kellogg.
And you could tell the difference. Dr. Kellogg was a very simple man, and he didn't have an ostentatious show of his stone.
Right.
He has a very nice plot,
Yeah.
and it's very nicely done. And WK, the same thing. Will Keith, he didn't have anything really ostentatious. He just has a sundial in his, and his name and the Kellogg identity. And it's so simple compared to some of the other ones.
Well, and when I was young, WK didn't have the iron fence there, and the brickwork wasn't there. It was
Right.
just the sundial and the family stones around there. They've since put the hedges around there and trimmed them.
Mhm.
And they put the plants, and this isn't how it used to be. I think does the Kellogg companies do this or?
Yes.
Okay, yep, okay,
Yes. In fact, they take care of it.
good, yeah, that's
Wow.
excellent.
So,
Just a couple of other examples. The tree. Somebody had something to say about that. That was actually common to have that kind of right.
yes.
Which one of you told me that? That
I think I did. I looked that up. That's from the Woodman of the World.
Mhm.
And there's also, I guess, the offshoot Woodman of America. And it was an insurance company formed in Omaha, Nebraska back in the 1890s. So what it was you paid a monthly thing, and they would provide for funeral expenses when you died, as long as you were keeping up your payments.
Sure.
And it was mostly for the family breadwinner to compensate the family for the loss of the person bringing in the money.
Yeah.
But and the trees were kind of a symbol of death back to life rather than the end of a life.
Yeah.
So it was, I've seen a lot of these in different forms. Some have many branches, some have stumps all around for the children. So, but they're all basically the same tree design with etchings or carvings there showing the names and the dates involved.
it's
As
really
a child, I always thought that was really cool because we'd go to cemeteries for Memorial Day, and you'd always look for the ones that looked like trees. Like I said, they had the little stumps with the family all around them, and we thought that was just amazing. We all wanted to die and have cemeteries like that. But
And there on the right, we have Sans McCamley, also at Oak Hill, and one of the town's founders, obviously responsible for the mill chase that gave Battle Creek its industrial might. And it wouldn't be a history program without some controversy. Now we're not sure whether Jonathan Guernsey is actually buried at Oak Hill. We were debating among ourselves.
sorry, I provided the picture and told Matt that was Oak Hill Cemetery, but I may be totally wrong with it. It's an old picture, so I don't even know where it was taken from. I thought it was Oak Hill, but
Yeah.
Yeah, and you may be right.
Mason.
But for folks who don't remember her or who have never heard before, it was Jonathan Guernsey who, with Sans McCamley, secured the land that led to the creation of the village of Battle Creek and Battle Creek, the city. Art Middleton on the upper right-hand side, he was an Enquirer reporter and city editor, and he created what we know of today as Remember a Vet annual fundraiser. So going on for what? A long time. More than 50 years.
Yeah.
More than 50 years. And then Butterfield, that might not be a name that folks are familiar with, but he was a theater magnate. He had a chain of theaters throughout the Midwest, and he got his start here with the Bijou in Battle Creek.
Yep.
So again, just a ton of really curious stones, and then of course on the monuments. Jim, you wrote the book Veterans of Oak Hill Cemetery. Talk a little bit about the canon and the plaque.
Well, the plaque is on a large boulder shortly after you come in and turn to the right. And it's not just Oak Hill veterans, it's all the soldiers from Battle Creek who died during the war. And it was raised by private funds. Now the cannon, actually the cannon was really super because there was a plaque on it that said this gun was in service on the Cumberland during the terrific battle between the Monitor and the Merrimack. If you're a Civil War buff, that was a famous battle between two ironclads. And it was mounted there by the Farragut Post number 32, Department of Michigan, the Grand Army of the Republic, in commemoration of the heroic services of Union soldiers and sailors during the Civil War. It was a huge gun. Let me see if I have. Yeah, it was. Well, during World War II, they had a scrap metal drive, and they brought in a 65-ton steam-operated crane belonging to Franklin Metal, which was loading the 10-ton cannon onto a railroad truck when the crane collapsed, and they sent not only the cannon but also the destroyed crane onto the metal drive for World War II.
I love that.
I will.
So both of them ended up on the scrap heap. But you can this 10-ton cannon is huge, and I'm glad you included the lower one. It gives you an idea of the size of those cannonballs. They're not bowling balls. They're much larger than those ladies' heads.
Yeah.
In comparison.
Yeah, it's unfortunate that's not there anymore. And then this is Veteran Circle. Is that what it's called, Jim?
It's American Legion Circle.
Okay.
For veterans of mostly since the 1900s. So it's not Civil War or other ones, although there are a few that were reinterred here for the dedication.
And then we, again, then we start with the first site that we want to kind of stop in, and this is a Sojourner Truth's grave site. What can you tell us about that, Linda?
Well, Sojourner Truth was very popular in Battle Creek, and she helped with the Underground Railroad, I think, as well. Is that right, Jim?
Oh, yes.
Part of that?
And suffragette.
Mm-hmm.
And she helped many of the ex-slaves in Washington, D.C. after the Civil War.
Yes. And no, go ahead.
No, you go ahead, Linda.
Well, she has a special plaque there, and it's not one that's issued by the state, but I believe, Jim, it's was issued. The Sojourner Truth group got together and had it done.
Yes.
And it's really, people come from all over to see her grave. She's really popular.
I say, Mac, you did a program on Sojourner Truth last year, and I learned so much from it. It was really, you did a great job because you told all kinds of background story. What an amazing woman she was.
It really was extraordinary. But if you go to YouTube,
right.
I didn't mean to talk over you, Jim.
She was the first Black woman to win a court case against a white man.
Yep.
In New York, I think in the United States.
Yes.
And she's buried there with one or two of her children. Let me say one or more of her children. And she does have a couple other children buried in Harmonia and elsewhere. So, but it's, a lot of people come here and for the cereal barons and for the White family.
Right.
Yes, the White family, they come from all over the world.
We get like 20,000 visitors from out of town every year.
Yes.
Wow, that's amazing.
They bring them by the busload.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
So, Mac, do we know what this picture was? Because I printed one of them from a glass negative a little while ago, and I was trying to figure out do we know what this group is?
Yeah, this is the Sojourner Truth Society, which was instrumental in erecting this monument at that time. I think there's been a few monuments on the grave site. I just love this photo, and thank you for sending this scan because it's better resolution than what I had, Kurt.
I'm guessing this was when it was that stone was erected, because I don't think she had a stone, or it was a smaller stone initially.
I believe you're right. The gentleman on the right there, the farthest man on the right, is Claude Evans.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Yeah. I just love that photo. And then you sent another. I did want to add that it's often assumed that Sojourner Truth was involved with the Underground Railroad, but in fact, I don't believe that she was.
Oh, she wasn't.
I
No.
don't think she was, but
Okay.
she is in the National Women's Hall of Fame, and she was the first woman named to the Michigan Hall of Fame back in the 1980s.
Good.
So I mean that's 100 years from when she was famous. She's still well known throughout the world.
In fact, I would say her star has risen quite a bit in just the last couple of decades.
Yes.
Yes.
I'm not familiar with this photo, Kurt. Do you know? Have any information about it?
No, and once again, I'm really bad. I was with a bunch of glass negatives I found, and I printed it and go, well, that's Sojourner Truth's grave, but I don't recognize any of the people standing there. I thought maybe I'd pick out one of them, but no, I have not got a clue. And even though the little lady in the center looks like her head's on top of the tombstone,
Yeah.
she's actually standing behind it. And this isn't the one that's there now, is it? This is a previous stone.
That's a previous stone. There's been another.
Yeah, this isn't the one that's there now.
The person on the right has some kind of medal on there, but it doesn't look like a GAR medal.
Yeah.
So
And
this
that's the dedication plaque that Linda was talking about. One side of it.
Uh-huh.
Yep, and there's the her family who's buried there with her 2 children and grandsons. The quote, "Is God dead?" Is a reference to an exchange between the Sojourner Truth and Frederick Douglass, who was speaking very despondently, I think, after the passage of the Fugitive Slave Act, and gave a real downer of a speech, and it was all quiet. And Sojourner Truth said, "Well, is God dead, Frederick?" And so it's inscribed on her stone. But yeah, just an extraordinary person, and
Yeah. Mhm. And she couldn't read and write. To me, I'm sorry, that just blows me away that she was so intelligent and so articulate, and she could not read or write. And you always tie those to being intelligent, and no, she was brilliant, and yet she could not read and write.
yeah.
And I think there's only 2 versions of her signature somewhere.
Yeah.
And they do have a facsimile on the large bronze statue in Monument Park.
Monument Park, right? Just doing the research about Sojourner Truth for that program, and I encourage anybody who's not seen it to watch it. It was a great slice, encompassing her entire life. It was like 2 hours long, so bring some popcorn. But there's a lot of myth around Sojourner Truth too, because she didn't read or write. She dictated her narrative, but that was a political document as well as a biography. And you see on the stone that she died at about 105 years old, which was simply not true. I think I can't remember her precise age, but I think it was in the 80s, early 80s. Anyway, just very interesting. And here we have a reenactment, and that has occurred in the past, and I assume we'll have more of those in the future, Linda. Those kinds of events.
Yes, we're looking forward to doing that again.
They are wonderful when you folks do those. It's always great because so many people come to them, which the first time I was amazed, because sometimes people in Battle Creek don't always come to these things, but it was done so well. And you folks, like I said, the place is beautiful anyhow, but the reenactors were so good, and it's such a great lesson of history to go and see people like that and be at their grave sites. It's really impressive. It's really impressive.
We have a comment here from Michelle Yarger, who was Art Middleton's niece, and thank you for joining us. And she's asking about the reenactments, so hopefully we can have some of those. Being an Inquirer veteran myself, Michelle, I very much esteemed his legacy.
She's the one that lives right behind you.
And then just a few steps away, Junior Walker, born as Audrey DeWalt Nixon. This to me is just one of the more fascinating. Well, it's a fascinating story in Battle Creek's history, and one of the things that's fascinating to me is that he's relatively contemporary. He was a very successful Motown act that crossed many genres, and one of the most successful in Motown. And he lived in Battle Creek. And it's extraordinary how few people know that.
Yep.
Even at the time of his death in 1995, Bobby Hawley, a local performer and friend of Junior Walker, said that, we had this legend living in Battle Creek, and Battle Creek missed it.
Yep.
But he was, Shotgun was his nickname. That was his first big hit. Any of you have some history about Junior Walker you want to share?
He was featured on one of those walking tours, and one of his son or his nephew had Junior Walker's saxophone that he played a few bars on, which was really nice. I mean, these tours are nice. I hope they do come
Very
around again. And that's the tour there.
Yep. Of course, I might surprise his name. I'm sorry, I thought it was Audrey. I did not know it was Autry. I didn't know that was how his name was spelled. I was always surprised when I finally saw that. But I thought it was Audrey, and I'm going, oh, okay.
So that marker is, again, just a few steps from Sojourner of Truth. So it's, if you're, and there is a map. If you stop by Linda's office, you can pick up a map. You can look at a map and try to find if you have something specific. And yes, Kurt, we have the book as well.
You can buy the book. This is, I'll plug this again. This is great. Jim edited this. It's excellent. It's great. It's great information. I just love opening it up and reading it because it lists not obviously everybody at Oak Hill Cemetery, but it has the biography and history of so many of the people that are buried there, and it's really well done.
And there is, I don't know, see, there's even a map in the back, but no graves are marked, so you really have to stop in the office.
And you can buy that book at Oak Hill Cemetery as well.
Yes.
Emily, you look like you were about to say something. Or were you just showing your book?
I'm just showing my book, but I don't know. Do we want a map? I think that makes for a fun scavenger hunt. Like you have to go through and you have to find.
Now, how many acres are there, Linda?
Oh, I don't recall, but there's a lot. I mean, we figure there's about 28 to 29,000 people buried there. So it's big. It's real big.
And I should say, so you're not disappointed, this has about 900 of those.
Mm-hmm.
It's not an every name cemetery book.
No,
there are all kinds of people buried there. And people keep asking us, is it full? Is it full? No, it's not full yet. We still have plenty of room.
And it's still open.
It's still open, yes.
And actually, you asked a question, Emily, the other day about whether the cemetery was segregated at all. And it's really not, right?
Not that I know of.
Yeah.
Not that I know of either. I think I said it wasn't, but I haven't seen any indication other than, like I mentioned, there are areas for veterans. There are areas for firefighters and elks. I mean, the club buys a couple dozen lots and enough for dozens and dozens of people. And they have their choice. They can get buried there probably for a reduced cost because they're members. But other than that, I don't think there's any stipulation of who is buried where.
So we wanted to include, we could do a whole program on the famous people buried at the cemetery, but some are lesser known. And actually, Jim, you brought George Colby to my attention. I had not heard of him before, but that's an interesting story.
Yeah, I did a lot of research for the book through obituaries and things and found information about different people. And I mentioned there were 900 people. There are 900 stories there, but in reality, there's 28 or 29,000 stories. Everyone there has left behind a family and stories. But George Colby was a police officer, and in 1911, he made the rank of detective. And it was in that year that he had one of his more interesting cases with world heavyweight boxing champion John Johnson. He was a heavyweight champion of the world, huge boxer, a lot of knockouts. And he was wanted for the federal government for jumping bond in Chicago, where he lived. Now, his wife lived in Canada. So often they would go back and forth between Chicago and Windsor. And in one of those places, the train was stopped because of this bond question. And Detective Colby woke him up in the middle of the night and arrested him. Well, Jack Johnson realized he did wrong, but he wasn't going to ride in the paddy wagon. And he ended up going to a friend of his who was a barber in town to spend the night to see the judge in the morning. And so he and his wife walked while Detective Colby carried his luggage to the barber's house. They spent the night, and then they went on their way after seeing the judge in the morning. And according to the newspapers, this happened time and time again. So I'm kind of thinking that he may have been arrested for violating the Mann Act, which was transporting a female across state lines for immoral purposes. Now, he was married, but I guess what I'm thinking was the marriage may not have been recognized in other states. So he was okay as long as he stayed put, but once he crossed the line, the state line, then he was violating a federal crime. That's my story, and I'm sticking with it because it makes sense. Why would he get arrested every time he traveled through Battle Creek, spend the night at the barber's, see the judge in the morning, and then be on his way the next day?
Yeah.
So,
well, I mean, it was scandalous at that time for a black man to marry a white woman. It was illegal, I think, in many states.
It was unusual, but yeah, it happened, and both between both sexes.
Yeah, I just threw up a couple other headlines because when you gave me his name, Jim, I just looked in the archive, the newspaper archive, and I mean, he was a very enterprising police officer. I think he came here and he started at Nichols and Shepherd. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah, and then he went to the place. He ended up being the county sheriff for a while.
Oh.
Well, so interesting story. And then going back over to the newspaper, I mean, all of us history lovers know who Russ Collar is. What do you know about Russ?
Other than the fact that he did his, he would do articles in the paper about and features different people around town. He'd do really in-depth stories about people, which are really valuable because when you go back and look through history, you'll find these great stories that he put together that tell the whole background of folks. And what were they called, Mac? I can't remember what they were called.
One was mainly about folks.
They were mainly about folks. Yep, that was yeah. So his collection is just an incredible resource for historians.
Yeah, he came up with 60,000 names before the internet. So if you look through his multi-volume loose leaf binder collection at the library, you can find any subject or any person you're looking for and every occurrence over the years of the newspaper and what pages they were on.
Yeah.
So in this picture, he's in the center, right?
He is in the center. Okay. Doesn't he look like a hard-bitten news guy? I mean,
yes, he does.
Yes.
Actually, they all do in a way. I thought that was Ed Asner to his right, but
I thought it was Ed Wynn.
Yeah, it looks like Ed Wynn.
Yeah. I like his short little tie. That's really cool.
Yeah, that is cool. But yeah, I mean, just an extraordinary chronicler. Apparently there was a story about him coming, I think, to the library where they throwing some things away. And that's where he started his index, his open index.
There it is. Yep, about folks. Okay, there we go. Yep.
Mainly about folks. He took that over from George Dolliver, who was the originator of that. So again, for those of us who try to read such and provide you some stories about all these people, it's an incredible resource. And again, anybody can come to the library and research newspapers all the way back to 1844 in Battle Creek. It's a gold mine. Care about history. And this was his feature that Jim Richmond wrote in, I can't remember the year now, but Against the Grain, which was
That's right. Uh-huh.
Yeah, a monograph of a lot of folks who contributed to community life. And Michael Martin. I think we all have stories about Michael. Kurt, you had to have known him pretty well.
Michael was a really very interesting man, and he was really devoted to Battle Creek history. And he and Dorothy, his wife, made it part of their life work to try to compile and organize the history of Black people in Battle Creek, because it had not been. There was histories out there, but not compiled in a really easy way to like try to put it all together and find it. And they worked years and years and years to put that all together. I think it's at Willard Library. Is their collection at Willard?
The collection of Willard, and all the photographs that they use are available on our historical archive online.
And Michael was a great. He was a lot, and he and Dorothy were really amazing people. That's they were fun.
Yes.
And I took that picture of them at the happy 100th birthday of the train station downtown. That was
City photographer.
And Dorothy did not like to have her picture taken, and that was one of those rare moments where she let me take her picture.
Yeah, that's true.
And they also have a multi-volume binder set at the library with for Black history.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the Martish collection.
Yep.
And we're working on getting that digitized and up online as well, in a user-friendly manner. One of my favorite stories, and if anybody else has a story, please share. But one of my favorite stories is I had my son report when some was
I went to go back up.
and he dropped a quarter through the cyclone fencing and couldn't reach it. And Michael noticed that and came up and gave my son a quarter. And he remembers.
Tracy had something smart about
There he is. Yep.
Oh wow, yeah.
the ball game. Celebrated pizza.
And his livelihood in Battle Creek, he ran a service station. Didn't he?
Yep. Yep, right out in front of Kmart on the corner of Dickman and Capitol Avenue. I know he had the service station there for a long time.
Yeah, I don't know.
There he is with my father in the center, and Bruce Phillips on the right. And that's out in front of the train station, which is now Clara's. That was at the 100th anniversary party that my mother threw for the birthday or for the train station, because we were trying to bring attention to it because they were going to talk about tearing it down because the city wanted it gone. But,
And I forgot to put up or add the link, but we have a program on that you can also find a story, the story about what became Claire's Michigan Center.
we have a theory about the picture that Bruce Phillips has just made an inappropriate joke, and my dad's giving him the look like, really, Bruce? You're really saying that? But
Can't believe it.
It's a great shot.
It is a great shot.
This is a good shot here because he had the project of identifying the source of all the street names in Battle Creek, which is the reason for him receiving the George Award.
Yeah, help you.
Yeah, he and Dorothy both received George Awards.
No.
Somebody might have a speaker or something on in the background. I don't know if anybody can.
I do. Sorry.
There should be a mute button, Linda.
I know, and he's talking to somebody from Jamaica. His friend. I should have him go into the other room. But I don't want to yell at him.
I tell
That's
you what.
okay. Usually you could I've just been hitting mute when I'm not talking. There's a little mute button. And then you can unmute when you want to talk. Anyway,
There you go.
Oh, okay.
either one.
And you can have Emily yell at him if you'd like.
Yeah.
Hey,
Where's
Hey,
that
you!
movement now?
Emily, I'm going to toss this one to you.
Yay, I know this person.
Yeah. Tell us all about him.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my goodness. Well, as mentioned, I'm the education outreach manager at the Kingman Museum here in Battle Creek. Originally started, our first director was Edward Brigham. And so he was a student at Battle Creek Central High School. After he graduated, he went to U of M and went on expeditions all over the world, collecting, rocks and fossils and specimens. You can see him here on an archaeological dig, probably looking for certain things he can bring back to the museum. He collected for U of M and for the Smithsonian, but did bring back some items to Kingman Museum as well, back to his school museum. And so in the 1930s, you can see here, he was able to acquire funds to get an off-site building, as you see here, which is where we've been, until right now. So that was, and I don't know if you can see, but it's Edward Brigham and his son Brigham Jr. Up against the, kind of the front hood of the truck when they're moving all of the animals into the new building here in 1932. So we've still got quite a few of those animals today. And you can see the front of the building here as it's facing Lila Arboretum. But he's been known throughout Audubon societies, expeditions, and collections. He's well known at University of Michigan, and so he was inducted into Battle Creek Central High School's Hall of Fame along with his son, who was our second director. He followed suit and was at Kingman Museum up until the 70s. So a lover of, earth science and animals and specimens. And so wanting to, showcase and bring that to the school children of Battle Creek, which is where he was from. And this is a plaque that's on the stone right outside the building there in Lila Arboretum.
Yeah, and I did put up the link to the Peeks into the Past episode on Kingman Museum and his life. But, it's just extraordinary. I mean, what high school has a natural history museum? We had one here in Battle Creek.
Right. That just celebrated 150 years last year. So still using his collection to inspire and spark, curiosity of the natural world today.
Yeah. And this is probably one of the more famous objects out there. And Kurt can tell you all about it.
Oh, the crying statue. No, I can't tell you much about the history other than the fact that I would tell Mac that when I was in high school trying to impress girls, we would go up into Oak Hill Cemetery late at night and try to get them all scared and tucked against us because we thought that was really smart for some reason. Guys, stupid things. But anyhow, we would get out of the car and go see if she was crying, and it was a fun thing to do, and it was still, even then at night, Oak Hill Cemetery was a cool place. It was like I was never scared up there, but I was sure trying to get the girls all frightened so they would like clutch.
Yeah, clutch. Jim was just holding up the Weird Michigan book.
Yes.
It's one of those things that it does have a history of its own. I mean,
It's the only article about Battle Creek, which is kind of weird in itself, but yes. And yeah, the patina on the face from the rainwater coming down over the years caused those streaks that looked like tears. And that was where the rumor began, unless Kurt started it. I don't know.
Isn't she supposed to be a statue of memory or something like that? Isn't that what the title of the statue is? Memory?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah. In fact, this statue, before it was put here, won an art award at the World Fair in Chicago.
Wow. So what do we know?
Or she's really haunted.
That's right. We don't know, right, Emily? We can't say.
That's the story.
We're just historians. We're not theologians or paranormal.
So that's the gentleman who's buried there, right? Isn't that?
Yes. His wife erected the statue for him.
And as far as I can tell, he was a dry goods merchant in Battle Creek, and that's about all that I've been able to find about him.
He might be a relative. He has my hairline.
I see a resemblance.
Jim Middleton says haunted. Definitely
haunted.
Okay, we got it here. We vet all of our Facebook sources here.
Well,
take it to the
I'm
bench.
surprised, but now we know.
But here you have a little close up. But yeah, it is a curiosity, and
of course, it's before and after in reverse order. It was cleaned recently.
Okay. I was going to ask you about that, Linda. Does it get cleaned very often?
Not very often. But it was pretty bad when they cleaned it, and it looks a lot better.
Was it like every 20 years or something, or
I'm not sure.
maybe not that often?
I
It
haven't,
takes a long
I haven't,
time.
I haven't heard that history yet. I know about Crying Mary. When I was a young teenager, I used to babysit up in that neighborhood, and we used to walk the cemetery. And the kids would always want me to take them to see Crying Mary.
Yep.
So it was popular back then, back in the 60s.
Do you have people walking in and asking about it very often?
Not really.
Okay, I
Not
just
really.
wondered.
Yeah.
But it's a good example, though, of how we often don't always get to choose what our headstones look like.
Right.
And it's at times how our loved ones want us to be remembered. It was his wife who chose this. Is that correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
So a lot of the stones sometimes reflect, how it's a symbol of memory and how we want to be remembered, not necessarily from ourselves, but from our loved ones.
And I spoke in error there. It's the model of the figure was awarded first prize at the Art Institute in Chicago.
I see.
Had nothing to do with the World's Fair.
Okay. And here's another one that I had not heard of before. And again, you can read about this in somebody hold up the book. In Jim's book, Blanche Bold. What do you know about Blanche, Jim?
And this came across, I did the research myself. She was a concert pianist and teacher, born in Battle Creek, and she attended Knox College Conservatory of Music in Galesburg, Illinois, graduating in 1892. And after graduating, became Dean of Music, and she really knew just about anyone in the music industry. And this photograph of her in younger years was taken from that yearbook. So I don't know if that's her normal dress for photo day, or if she may have been in a play or something, and that was a costume. But anyway, that's the other picture is later in life. Obviously, she lived to over 100, I think, or close to 100.
Close to 100, I think. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that photo was actually taken, I think, after having a bad fall, being injured in a fall. And they did the photograph. They wheeled her up to a piano, and she performed in the hospital. But I don't think she lived long after that. But yeah, neat little stories. And then this story I also didn't know about. And regale us again, Jim.
Well, this is anytime you win a national award, that's kind of special. And this woman here was woman is a champion archer, and she won her first national archery championship in 1887, and the prizes she won together with her archery outfit were presented to the Battle Creek High School Museum. How many high schools have a museum? I mean, was that the same? That wasn't the same museum, was it? Because an outfit wouldn't be natural history. So at any rate, I don't know how good she was, but she was better than anyone else in the country.
So that's pretty good.
I don't know if she could split an arrow at 200 yards.
That's so cool.
That is.
So cool.
There's a cool shot. And that was in the 1905 or 1906 Spalding catalog where that photo was displayed. So giving credit to the place that I stole it from.
I think she was shooting the apple off of the crying statue in that picture. That was what she was doing
at midnight.
Yes, at midnight. Yep.
This is the Katniss of the 19th century.
Yep.
No wonder the statue was crying.
Sorry, folks, that isn't real history. Sorry, that's not real history.
Not real history.
We don't know that.
Yeah.
Well, and one last slide I wanted to go by was the White family plot, and this kind of is a great illustration of what you talked about earlier, Emily. The family plot I mean, it's delineated. But Ellen White, also in her own right, or more than in her own right, period, she is an extraordinary figure in not just Battle Creek history, but international history. Um, and how many? You have a lot of visitors to this site, Linda, right?
Yeah, we have thousands in the summer. They come by the busload.
She was the founder of the Adventist. Well, one of the founders of the Adventist Church. So,
Yes.
Between
Yes.
her and her husband James, and you can read. There's a plaque there as well. Yeah, it's they were followers of the Millerites.
Yep.
And which the Miller predicted the end of the world, and I can't remember the date off the top of my head, but when the world
There were several.
there were several.
There were.
But there was one in particular that became known as the Great Disappointment. But it was out of that disillusionment that she really began to share her visions, and ultimately led to the creation of the Seventh-day Adventist Church here in Battle Creek. And there you have a portrait of her and her husband, and also of Miller.
She was named among the 100 most significant Americans in the Smithsonian Magazine for her influence on religion.
Yeah.
And I know her writings about many subjects, not just religion. I know at one point she sold more copies in more languages than any other writer in history. And I don't know why that doesn't still stand. It probably does.
I think it still does stand.
Well, I haven't seen anything lately, but
when you think about, significant influencers of Battle Creek, without an Ellen White and the Seventh-day Adventist Church, we wouldn't have the cereal industry.
Nope.
Right.
right.
Mm-hmm.
We certainly wouldn't have had the sanitarium.
No.
And we wouldn't have the Federal Center today.
Right. Yeah, I hope most people know that that's probably the building on the right is the Federal Center now, but just the tower would be constructed on the right hand side of that now. But that's the building that faces Washington Street, and then the church on the left is the tabernacle before it burned, and they rebuilt the new tabernacle in its place. But it was quite a place. Oh, there we go.
There you go.
Yeah.
And
You
there's
jumped the gun.
100 most significant Americans of all time. And again, it's interesting how, when you think about history, we talked about Junior Walker earlier, and he had a significant impact on the music industry. And I think most people know the Seventh-day Adventist Church was founded in Battle Creek, but they don't realize the significance of this individual who came and settled here, and her influence, worldwide.
Oh, and Linda's right that so many people come here to many of my friends are always surprised either when they're up at Oak Hill about the people touring it. I'm going, well, this is where the Seventh-day Adventist Church was founded, and people come here because this is like the headquarters of their church. They want to see these people, and we get thousands and thousands of people coming in and visiting Battle Creek. It's really an amazing piece of history that lots of people locally just don't pay much attention to. Like I said, Junior Walker, they just don't know it.
Yeah.
It's a significant pilgrimage.
Yes.
For sure.
Yeah. Yep.
And Ellen and James White were co-founders of the religion, but
Right.
there are several dozen of the early pioneers of the Seventh-day Adventists buried at Oak Hill.
Yep.
And they're marked by little white flags around the cemetery. You can just drive from one to another and see them everywhere.
Yeah. And this is the photograph of her actual funeral service at the cemetery.
Yep.
Oh, it's a great picture.
Uh-huh. Yep.
Oh,
It really is.
Mm-hmm. So, bam.
And so, yeah, we got both of the books. Linda, tell me, if someone wanted to just come out and they come out during business hours and knock on your door or walk in your door.
Walk in the door, yeah.
Walk in the door, and you have a lot of resources to help them. You have these books for sale, obviously, and there's a big map on the wall. I mean, how would somebody just go about strolling around and getting to know the cemetery? Just that simple, right?
Yeah.
Around and get to know the
Rolling around. Yeah. If they have somebody they want to see, if they have a name and they're not famous, then we find that where they're buried and we explain to them how to get there. And 9 times out of 10, we have to show them where it is, except for Mac. He just did a great job on his search. And yeah, and it's so interesting. I mean, I just every day I learn something new. It's just a very interesting place to be.
And I want to plug the books again, Jim. You did a great
Yes.
job with those. They're really wonderful to look through. I mean, I'm a historian, so I like that stuff anyhow. But just you can pop it open and read about someone, or you can look people up that you might know their name and you find out all about them. It's really an excellent job, Jim. You did an excellent job editing it,
Great job.
and Linda, I'm so glad that you folks have it available up at the cemetery, because it's a great
Definitely.
resource.
Well, just a word on that. The veterans I did last, and while I was doing the first book, I kept coming across these different veterans from all the wars, from Revolution on, and they need their own book. So there's about 2,000 veterans in that second book. Now, the first book, I was really so I did that one from scratch, but the Beyond These Gates was a reprint from a book that was done about 20 years earlier. In fact, the original book is online for free, I believe, for anyone without a library card on the Willard Library website. So if you want it, now I revamped a lot of it because it listed several families in one paragraph, and it was a little confusing. So the reprint has about twice as many pages, just because I formatted it a little differently, and I also included the Find a Grave Memorial IDs and other things in both of those newer
You
books.
found lots of pictures. I know you added photographs.
I added, yeah, there were like 30 photos in the first book. There's several hundred in the second. So,
Again, you did an excellent job. It's a great asset.
well, thank you.
Yep, press tab.
You can also find it on Amazon.
You can also find it on Amazon and the
Not Battle Creek if you can't get over there.
yeah, if it's too expensive to come to Battle Creek and just to pick up the book, you can buy it on Amazon, and the royalties still go to the cemetery either way.
And
Which brings up an important point. These are sacred sites that do not last on their own. It does take work. It takes volunteers. It takes money to maintain the landscaping. These buildings crumble a little. Linda, I understand you're in the middle of a campaign right now to raise funds for, is it the chapel?
For the chapel, yes. We have, unfortunately, the chapel has not weathered very well in the last few years. And so we're looking to get a grant or whatever we can get to bolster the roof and get the mechanical things fixed. And I mean, it's just too beautiful to let go of.
Yes.
It's just a beautiful building, and it's beautiful inside and out.
So do you folks do cremations up there?
Yes, we do.
I thought you had a crematorium there
We have
also.
a crematory,
Yep.
yes.
Okay. Yep.
Yes.
And Mac left out the picture of the giant mausoleum that used to be up there, because that was also a site I used to take girls to and try to get them all excited, because you'd go in and show how brave you were, because I would put my arm through the broken glass and count to 30 at night and show how incredibly brave I was. Now, all it would have taken was a moth to hit my hand, and I would have been out of that cemetery like you. Bam,
Right. Yeah.
But what's good, being the manly guy I was like, I could stick my arm in a broken window and like do that. But
Did you ever try dinner in a theater? Kurt?
What? That's crazy, Jim. Why would women like that?
Should probably note it is illegal to enter a cemetery after dusk. Would that be still correct for?
Well, you can see in those early photos, there's just a 2-foot high stone fence. Now there's a wrought iron fence going around. So, yeah, it's a little bit more difficult now than it would be in Kurt's heyday.
Dinner and a show. I'm still trying to figure that one out.
Now I tell you.
Explains a lot.
Thanks, bro.
Well, as always, it's a lot of fun to hang out with you folks. Any parting words? Linda, any parting words?
Well, we love to have people come and visit. And if you're interested in history, the books are available. I've only been there 3 years, so I haven't had the experiences that a lot of my coworkers have had. One has been there almost 12 years, and she knows the cemetery like the back of her hand. And it is an overwhelming sometimes when you think about these people that did so much in our city and just gave so much of their life to the city. It is just awesome.
Yeah.
Which goes to show that though literally a place for the dead, it really is a place for the living. This
Yes.
is where we hold memory. We keep these stories alive by visiting
Exactly.
these sacred spaces, right?
Mhm. Yes, and we have a lot of families buried up there. They've been families for years and years and years that have been buried there. So it's quite interesting.
And it is a beautiful place. Like I said, it's a beautiful place just to go walk through and get names. You'll go like, I remember that from history, and I remember different things. It's just looking at the headstones. There's some beautiful headstones up there.
Yes.
We talked about that when we all got together. It is just a wonderful place, and you people out there do a wonderful job taking care of
Thank
it. Keep up the good work, and Mac, I'll do a plug for you again. You do a great job, as I said earlier, herding kittens because he has to try to deal with us all talking, and he did a really nice job. You always do a really nice job, Mac.
Oh, I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Always a lot of fun. Working on our next program in June. It's a tour of Old Maple Street. And if you don't know what Maple Street is, you can join us next month. What day of the week is that? I can't remember.
Was that a Monday?
It's a Monday. We'll advertise it, but that's
Looking forward to it.
no,
Yes, let's keep these peeks into the past going. This is fun. Yeah.
Maple Street is what we now know today as Capitol Avenue Northeast. And it'll start there at the Kimmel House Museum. And we'll just do a sampling of some of the beautiful old stately homes, and some of the architecture and the people behind them. So working on that, and we'll have that for you in a few weeks. Other than that, thank you everybody for joining me. It's always a blast. And yeah, folks, you're looking for something to do on a nice day. You don't even need the book, although the book makes it more informative. But just stroll around and look at the monuments and just wonder at the contributions that people made. It's just a lot of fun. Nice way to spend an afternoon with the family.
Yes, it is.
All right. And
thank you,
everybody. And we will see you soon.
Okay.
Thank you, Mac.
Bye.
Mac.